Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello, my name is Swayam Sharma and we are doing Introduction to Chinese Studies course. So today is the fourth lecture called Schools of Ancient Chinese Thought. Now every civilization has certain ideas that are prevalent in that civilization. In China also, there are certain ideas that emerged in the ancient times. The most productive period of Chinese history, when most of these ideas emerged, these philosophies emerged, were two periods. First one was Spring and Autumn period, second one was the Warring States period. Now the Spring and Autumn period starts in 771 BCE. This was when the Zhou dynasty was nominally the ruler of China. In 771, what happened was the capital of the Zhou dynasty, Haoqing, was attacked by a nomadic tribe, Chuanrong, and they destroyed the capital and killed the king You. As a result, the Zhou had to shift their capital from, Haoqing is somewhere here. If you look at the map, it's around here. It's in Xi'an today, and from here they shifted the capital towards the east. Okay, so the period before 771 is called the Western Zhou period, and the period after 771 is known as the Eastern Zhou period. And that is why this actually year is the beginning of the Spring and Autumn period. And the name Spring and Autumn comes from a famous work, Spring and Autumn Annals. Spring and Autumn Annals, which are historical records of the state of Lu. You can see here in the east, there is a state of Lu here. Confucius belonged to that state. He served in that state for many years. And so it's a record of the entire history of this state, beginning with 722 to 481 BCE. And it is supposedly compiled and edited by Confucius. Now, what happened in the Spring and Autumn period? So, in this period, the power of the Zhou dynasty began to decline more and more. It was already declining. It had to shift the capital because of its declining power to make itself more secure. But gradually, the power eroded even further. And as you can see in this map here, number of small states emerged in China, nominally still under the Zhou, but they had their own regional autonomy. Okay, so it's full of different states. And because of that, these local rulers, they encouraged different scholars, they promoted different scholars from whom they took ideas and tried to introduce reforms in their own states. So it was a very vibrant period. So competition leads to vibrancy. A society which is a bit too united, there is no opposition, there is no competition, everything is top down. Such a society is less vibrant. The chances that type of society will become stagnant. While a society where there is always a competition, warfare going on, the rulers are unsure whether they will remain in power, they have to be at the top of their game. They have to be always prepared for any situation, and they would have to try to overcome their enemies. So that allows for development of new ideas. Okay, so that is the reason that Spring and Autumn period was quite a productive period. And in fact, the next period, the Warring States period, was even more productive because these autonomous rulers gradually created kingdoms of their own. So some of them took the titles of kings. Earlier they had the title of dukes. That means nominally they were under the Zhou king, but now several states were formed. You can see these are the 7 main states. By the year 260 BCE, we have these 7 states: Qin, Zhao, Wei, Han, Chu, Qi and Yan. Okay, these are the 7 states. Now, so how does Warring States periods begin? So different scholars give different year for the beginning of this particular period. I have taken the year given by Sima Qian, the author of Records of the Grand Historian. He gives the year 476 BCE as the beginning of the Warring State period. And this is the year when King Yuan, he inaugurated his reign. Okay, so he was the 27th Zhou king. He inaugurated his reign. Now, this period gets its name from another book called Strategies of the Warring States, which is a record of the diplomatic practices and military practices of the period. So, how what strategies each of these kingdoms followed in order to become the hegemonic power. So, that is all recorded in this particular book, Strategies of the Warring States. And from there, this period gets the name, the Warring States period. An important event that begins this period was, see, in between here, if you look at the previous map, there's this kingdom of Qin. Okay, this kingdom of Qin here. At the beginning of the Warring State period, the kingdom of Qin was the strongest kingdom during Zhou dynasty, during the second half of the Zhou dynasty rule. As you can see here, by this time, the kingdom of Qin has been divided into 3 smaller kingdoms, Zhao, Wei and Han. So 3 smaller kingdoms emerged out of this kingdom of Qin. Okay, so this is the Warring States period. Now let's look at the philosophy. So this is kind of a brief background of the historical context in which the different schools of thought emerged. Now let's talk about the ideas or the schools themselves. Now there's a Chinese saying called Pai Hua Qi Fang, Pai Chia Cheng Ming. It means Pai Hua Qi Fang means let 100 flowers bloom. Pai Chia Cheng Ming means let 100 schools of thought contend. This is a very famous saying in China. In the modern times, the founder of the Communist China, Mao Zedong, in 1956, he made it very famous by launching the 100 Flowers movement. Okay, 100 Flowers movement in 1956. So his idea was, just like during the Warring States period, so many different hundreds of schools of thought emerged. So in the new China that he had founded, or the Communist Party had founded, also should have a lot of vibrant ideas emerging. And so he encouraged scholars to bring their ideas to public, write about them, publish them. In fact, he went on to say that you can even criticize the government, you criticize the Communist Party. Okay, he encouraged scholars to freely express their ideas. So basically the goal was to ensure that the vibrancy that the Warring States period saw that emerges in modern China also. But the criticisms was too much for Mao to handle, and the next year, 1957, he launched the anti-rightist campaign under Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping was given the charge, and all these scholars who had criticized Mao or Communist Party or the government or his policies, all of them were persecuted. They were arrested, they were sent to labor camps, so on and so forth. In fact, Mao compares himself to Shi Huangdi in this case. Shi Huangdi supposedly have buried 460 Confucian scholars alive. So Mao boasted that I am greater than Shi Huangdi, because Shi Huangdi buried only 460 scholars, while he had buried more than 400,000. Not literally, of course, but practically he ended their careers and destroyed their lives. So it's like burying them. Okay, so this is the concept of 100 schools of thought. Now, the concept of schools of thought itself, so see that there are different philosophers who come and express their views, okay, who become popular, who are implemented, some don't become popular, so on and so forth. These things keep happening. But how do you categorize different philosophers into one group? So you can say, okay, these philosophers belong to this school of thought, or these others belong to some other school of thought. Okay, so that was first done by Sima Tan. Sima Tan was the father of Sima Qian, who was the author of Records of the Grand Historian. In fact, Sima Than had begun that work, but he died, and so it was completed by his son in 91 BC. As I told you, this is the first systematic history book written in China. Now, in this book, there is an essay authored by Sima Than called Essential Points, Yao Zhi, Essential Points, which for the first time introduces the concept of schools of thought. And he identifies basically 6 schools of thought, 6 schools, or families. Okay, the word used is Chia. Chia means family or home. Okay, so he categorizes certain philosophers. You can see during this period, this Zhou dynasty period, the later half of the Zhou dynasty period, spring and autumn period, warring state periods, number of philosophers emerged. You can see in this map the names of all these great philosophers that emerged during this period. What you will notice is the concentration of these philosophers is at a particular point position geographically in China. Okay, this is along the Yellow River. The Yellow River flows here like this. So most of these philosophers emerged at this. So this was the core of Chinese civilization. On the other hand, if you see the Qin state or the Chu state, which are geographically larger, but not many philosophers have emerged in these territories. Okay, so it was the Yellow River Valley which was the core of Chinese civilization, core of Chinese philosophy. Okay, so 6 schools of thought. Now, what are these 6 schools of thought? Now, according to Sima Than, there were 6 schools of thought in China. The first one is what he called Ruchia, or what we know as Confucianism, which was which later on went on to become the most dominant school of thought. At the time of Sima Than, Confucianism had not yet become the state-sponsored ideology. Because Sima Than, you remember, he belonged to the Han Dynasty period, and Han Dynasty actually made Confucianism as the official ideology of the Chinese Empire. But at that time, the situation was still in flux. Confucianism had not yet assumed that particular role. In fact, Sima Than himself was more inclined towards Taoism than towards Confucianism. Okay, so I will not go into his essay that he has written, and he has given his own views on different schools because these are very brief, and though they don't really give us a complete picture of what these schools of thought were like. So I'll depend more on, say, the later texts and the later developments of these schools when they assumed a kind of a form that they have today. So it took many centuries for them to develop. So I'll try to present a kind of a complete form to you, mentioning some important scholars who contributed to these different schools and the essential points of each of these schools. So the first school, of course, is Confucianism, Ruchia. So Ruchia means, Ru means scholars. Okay, Chia means school. Okay, so school of scholars. So these Confucians were traditionalists. They studied the ancient classics, they preserved them, they followed Confucius. Okay, and so they were known as school of scholars. They were scholarly people who studied a lot, wrote a lot, and so on and so forth. Now, the second important school of thought is legalism. Legalism, which Sima Than calls Fa Chia, or school of method. Fa means method. Fa means method. Now, what does it mean? It means that this school emphasizes not on the person, but on the rules and regulations. That's why it's called by the Western scholars as legalism, because it emphasizes on rules and regulations, rewards and punishments. Okay, so it's methodological school. So school of method. Now, this was quite a popular school. The first emperor, Shi Huangdi, was a follower of the legalist school, and he used legalist methods to defeat all other kingdoms during the Warring State period. He defeated all other kingdoms and established the Chinese Empire under the Qin dynasty. Then the third important school of thought was Taoism, okay, or Tao Chia. So Tao means way, the path. Okay, so this school basically focused on following a way of life which would lead to a kind of a higher form of reality. Internally, you achieve some kind of a higher form of reality by following this path. Okay, so that path is known as Tao. Now, I like to mention certain things, that all these terms, say Fa, Tao, even Ru, all the schools use them. It's not that a Confucian will say Tao is the wrong thing. So, but according to Confucians, the interpretation of Tao will be different than the interpretation of the Taoist. For the Confucians, Tao is something external. It is related with heaven, Tian. Tian is the most important concept in Confucianism. So, Tao has to be following the way of Tian. It's more external in nature. While for a Taoist, it's more about internal development, internal realization. When I go into these schools, I'll explain in more details. Let's move on. So, these three schools have remained relevant in Chinese history for a very long time, and even now you can say some of these ideas are prevalent. So, Confucianism is still very much researched in China, and many Chinese scholars suggest different ideas based on Confucianism. Legalism is also very popular because legalism is considered to be very modern in a sense, and so a lot of scholars work on legalism. Now, Taoism remains popular in popular culture. Taoism is one of the recognized religions in China. So, among these schools of thought, only Taoism is designated as a religion in China. Okay, so it's followed by large number of people, millions of people in China, and also overseas Chinese follow Taoism. And Taoism is also popular among, say, some Western New Age people who like to follow some of these ideas. Okay, so these three schools are very much in existence right now. The other schools are not so much in existence independently. The fourth one is Moism. Now, this school is known as Moism because it was started by Mo. Okay, so it's known as Moism. Master Mo or Mo Tzu. Okay, his school is known as Moism or Mo Chia. I'll discuss his ideas when I come to it. Let me mention all the other schools. The fifth is Yin and Yang Chia. Yin and Yang is an ancient Chinese doctrine. If you refer to the first lecture, I told this myth of Fan Ku. Okay, Fan Ku was the first being that emerged in this universe according to Chinese myth. Okay, so Fan Ku was born out of this egg, okay, which consisted of Yin and Yang, and out of that Fan Ku was born. So Yin is the feminine principle and Yang is the masculine principle. Okay, so Yin turns into the earth and Yang turns into the sky, and the sky moves higher and higher and earth becomes thicker and thicker. Okay, so in 18,000 years, finally the earth as we know it and the sky that we know comes into form. Okay, so that was the story. And every as I told you, every civilization had such kind of stories. In India also, I told you in the Vedas, there is the concept of Hiranyagarbha. Okay, so out of which everything is born. Finally, the last school, the sixth school, is School of Names, Ming-Chia, School of Names. Now, some scholars have mentioned this particular school. For example, Joseph Needham considers this school to be a very important school, scientifically very important because they were very logical in their approach. Unfortunately, not much of the literature that they wrote has survived. So, we don't know much about this school, except that they were logicians, they applied logic to language, and there are some criticisms or fun things which other people have referred to. So, there are some paradoxes, logical paradoxes and so on, for which this school is known. But beyond that, what were the doctrines, who were the important scholars, all those things have been lost in history. Okay, so these were the 6 schools of thought in ancient China according to Sima Tan. It is said that some of these schools were actually created by Sima Tan himself. Some of them had already existed in the past, but some of them were unique ideas that Sima Tan contributed to. So, whatever it is, now we have 6 schools of thought. Let's look at in a bit more details what each of these schools says. I did a separate lecture on Confucianism. The third lecture was on Confucianism. But still, let me summarize some of the points. Okay, what Confucianism is all about. Now, Confucianism, obviously, the name itself says that it was founded by Confucius, Kung Fu Tzu. That was his Chinese name, Kung Fu Tzu. And so the Portuguese, when they went to China, they Latinized the name as Confucius. Okay, so he lived from 551 BCE to 479 BCE. Now, Confucianism is based on ancient Chinese literature known as 4 books and 5 classics. Okay, the 4 books are attributed to Confucius, for example, the Analects, but there are others which are attributed to his disciples and the disciples of his disciples. The last one being Mencius. So these are the 4 books. 5 classics are books or texts which pre-existed Confucius, but it is believed that Confucius compiled all these in a book form and edited them and gave them the final form. Okay, so that is the belief in Confucianism. So when Confucianism turned to Neo-Confucianism, these 4 books and 5 classics became the syllabus of the civil service exams in China. So anyone who wanted to be a civil servant in China, a Mandarin, had to pass exams based on these Confucian classics. Okay, so from these Confucian classics, we derive the main ideas of Confucianism. So what are the main ideas? The first idea is education. Second one is social relations. Third is social hierarchy. So goal of Confucianism is to create gentlemen. So every person has to become a gentleman. So Confucian education is not about technical education. It's not about how to earn your living. It's about how to develop virtue. Okay, so Confucians believe in 5 cardinal virtues: benevolence, righteousness, rights, wisdom, and integrity. These are the 5 cardinal virtues in Confucianism. So the goal of education is to develop these qualities in a person. So in this, there were 2 schools of thought. One was Mencius, the other was Sun Tzu. So Mencius believed that human beings are good by nature. Okay, so goodness or virtue come from within human beings. The goal of education is to help in that process, to guide in that process, so that the good qualities come out in a very smooth manner. Okay, and a person very quickly becomes a gentleman. On the other hand, Sun Tzu, who was also a Confucian, according to the categories created by Sima Tan, he believed that human beings are evil by nature. They are attracted not towards virtue but towards vice. Okay, so if left alone, human beings will all try to do bad things. They won't follow rules. They will do things which are harmful to society, and therefore they cannot be allowed to do so. From a small age, from childhood, a child has to be brought under very strict education, under strict punishment. Okay, so that they don't deviate from virtue. They should be forced to follow virtue, and over the course of time, due to education, due to the strictness, they will develop virtue. Okay, so virtue, according to Sun Tzu, is not something which is internal. It has to be imposed. According to Mencius, it is internal, it is easy, it is automatic, and it should be just encouraged. Okay, if a person is suppressed, then the virtue would be suppressed, according to Mencius. According to Sun Tzu, it's the opposite. Okay, so in this way, there was a split within Confucianism also, as far as the education system is concerned. Now, a Confucian society is based on social relations, it's based on harmony, that people behave properly with one another. They behave properly through righteousness with one another. And this righteousness, the most important part of this righteousness is filial piety, our duty towards our elders and ancestors. That is called filial piety. Okay, so that is a very important component of Confucianism. So you have to respect your elders. There are certain rituals that you have to perform. For example, you bow down before them, greet them, obey them, and so on and so forth. And once those ancestors die, according to Confucianism, they turn into spirits, and so you make offerings to the dead ancestors. Okay, that is all part of Confucianism. Now, among all the relations, there are 5 important relations according to Confucius. These are known as 5 great relations or 5 great bonds. These are between the emperor and the subject, or the king and the subject. So in this case, the subject has to obey the king and the king has to protect the subject. Then the second relation is between father and son. So just like king and subject, the king protects and the subject obeys. Similarly, the father protects and the son has to obey the father. Okay, it's similar. So father takes the role of the king in the household. So father is the king of the house. Then in the absence of the father, the other relation is elder brother and younger brother. So elder brother here takes the position of the father. So it's the duty of the elder brother to protect the younger brother, provide in case of need. Similarly, it's the duty of the younger brother to consult the elder brother. So for example, the younger brother wants to get his children married, so he should consult the elder brother, so on. So this is all part of filial piety. Now, as far as the relationship between men and women, so it's husband and wife according to Confucius. So husband is the superior here and wife is the subordinate. So the wife has to obey the husband and husband has to protect the wife. So it's a patriarchal type of a family system. These 4 relations are hierarchical in nature. There is a superior and a subordinate. But there is a 5th relation which is equal, that is friend and friend. Okay, so friendship was valued by Confucius. It was a very formal type of a thing. If someone is your friend, then it's not that you simply like that person and talk to that person. Friend means you have to help that friend in need. Okay, and so it's like family. Friend becomes part of the family. And so according to Confucius, all these relations are actually the foundations of society. Without these relations, the society will crumble. There will be no harmony in society. Finally, the final point is social hierarchy. So Confucians don't believe in an egalitarian society, all are equal and all. They don't believe in that. They believe that society has to be hierarchically organized. Okay, but this hierarchy should not be based on birth, but it should be based on meritocracy. Okay, and this meritocracy was established through the exam system. Okay, so in China, from a very early period, civil service exams were introduced. Okay, so Confucians also encouraged this process of civil service exams, and based on that, the highest position a person could achieve in society was that of a gentry. So gentry was the highest occupation in society. Of course, above the gentry was the imperial family or the royal family, the king and his relatives. They are above the gentry, but that is a special case because they are connected with Tian or heaven, and so they have a special role in society. But among the ordinary people, the highest position is that of a gentry. Gentry basically means a scholar who owns a lot of land and as a result is able to sustain life through their knowledge. Number 2 are the peasants who grow food for society. So they are number 2 in importance because food is very important for survival and also the survival of the state. Number 3 are the artisans who produce implements and appliances that are used by people. The 4th are the merchants. Merchants, because they don't produce anything, they exchange goods, so that is also useful, but it is not as useful as, say, producing something. Okay, so they are at number 4. Below the merchants are other professions which were not considered to be dignified in Chinese society. Okay, so Confucians basically believed in this hierarchical type of a system. Now, when the Westerners started going inside China or influencing China in the 19th century, China basically crumbled at the face of European powers. Although China was such a large empire, the largest empire in the world with the largest population. In fact, if you look GDP wise also, at that time I think China was the largest GDP in the world. But still, when the European powers like Britain, France, they intervened in China. In fact, also Japan intervened in China. China was not able to fight against them, was not able to resist them. So the scholars of those time basically blamed Confucianism for that. Because you can say whole hierarchy in Confucianism puts merchants or earning profit at a lower level and learning the Confucian classics at the higher level. Confucian knowledge is not a knowledge, say technical knowledge or which leads to industrialization. It's more about moral knowledge, moral education. Okay, so instead of emphasizing on science and technology, Confucians emphasize more on virtue. Okay, so these were the reasons that cited by scholars that led to decline in Chinese society and stagnation of Chinese society. And because Confucianism had become so dominant, all other schools of thought basically were sidelined or absorbed by Confucianism. Nothing else remained. There was no competition. There was no vibrancy in society. And so society began to crumble. It became stagnant, and therefore the Europeans were able to overtake China. The next important school of thought is legalism. Now, the most important scholar of legalism was Han Feizi. In fact, the book itself is known as Han Feizi, which is a kind of a commentary on history, and which takes lessons from them, which basically gives us the doctrine of legalism. Now, there are some other politicians and scholars who inspired and influenced Han Feizi. You can say they were the progenitors of the legalist school. Okay, although the school itself was not known at that time. So some names, let me give you some names: Shang Yang, Shen Pu Hai, Shen Tao. And then of course Han Feizi comes after that, and then we have Li Si. Now, Shan Yang was an advisor to the Qin state. Okay, the Qin state, which eventually then conquered the other warring states and became the Qin Empire. So Shang Yang was the first person to introduce reforms in the Qin state. Okay, so what he did was, he introduced a system of rewards and punishments. So he created certain laws which was applicable uniformly. It didn't matter if you are an aristocrat or an ordinary citizen. Everyone had to obey the law. If you did not obey the law, you were given strict punishments. Okay, very severe punishments, cutting off limbs and all those kinds of things. And it was applicable not just to ordinary people but also to aristocrats. But say if you, say the state announced certain goals, and if the citizens or any person who was able to achieve that goal, they were handsomely rewarded. Okay, so this is the system of rewards and punishments that he introduced. He did not like that there are some aristocratic families who control all the land and basically they don't serve the state. And therefore, he redistributed land. He took away land from these aristocrats and gave it to those people who were militarily successful. So land was connected to military success. If someone could, say, expand the territory of the Qin kingdom by defeating the neighboring states or getting more territory, they were given land. Okay, the best of lands was given to them to earn their money, living from there. While the aristocrats who were not really contributing to the state, land was taken away from them. So this was a land reform that he introduced. This also helped in the military reforms. He basically divided the whole state into different groupings, and from each grouping certain number of subjects were picked to join the army. They served in the army, and those who served well, they were given land. And so in that way, Qin was able to build a very, very strong army. He emphasized more on cultivation than on trade. Okay, so if you look at the map, you can see Qin is located quite far from the center of Chinese civilization. Okay, it's quite far. It's far to the west. And there's a lot of land nearby, as you can see. Okay, this is all land for open to conquest. And in fact, some of this land was basically uninhabited. There was no one living there. And so, Shang Wang, he started expansion of the Qin kingdom by occupying those lands and cultivating those lands. He sent people there and made them do agriculture there. As a result, these lands were all integrated with the Qin state. He also encouraged immigration in order to increase the population, because you see, in those days there are two important things to become a power. One was population, because to have a big army you need a lot of people. Number two was that army had to be fed, had to be given food. So agriculture. If you ensure these two things, you could become a very big power in those days. And so that is what he did. As a result, Qin emerged as the most powerful of the 7 kingdoms, and therefore Qin was ultimately successful to defeat the other kingdoms. Okay, so this is the contribution of Shang Yang, and the reforms that he introduced is all part of legalism. Then there are other thinkers like Shan Pu Hai, and they are considered to be a kind of a different branch of legalism from Shang Wang. Shang Yang is more about rewards and punishment and administrative reforms. Shang Pu Hai and Shan Tao were more about strategy. Okay, so basically they talked about a meritocratic system, so some form of exam. Okay, they were the first to say that there should be exam. In fact, they said that human beings should play less of a role in deciding matters of state. It should all be decided by law. Okay, so a law should be made and everyone should obey the law. Okay, it should not depend on an individual. So rather than rewards and punishment, obedience to law should be the basis of, or the method of, the state. The second thing is concept of wu wei. Wu wei. Wu wei means doing nothing, inaction. So they said in some cases inaction is the best policy, not to do anything. Okay, what used to happen is sometimes the rulers used to get very excited, so someone challenged them to a war and they decided to go and fight, but they were not prepared and they would get defeated. So the legalists argued that that should not be the policy. In some cases you should do nothing, you should wait and watch. Okay, you should wait for the power equation to change. Okay, when power is favorable to you, only then you attack. When you are weak, then you remain quiet, you don't do anything. Only when you are strong, then you attack. Okay, so this is very, very interesting ideas. Now Han Feiche and the other person here, Li Si, both of them were disciples of the Confucian scholar Sun Tzu. Okay, so they studied under him. Now Sun Tzu believed that human nature is evil. Han Feiche basically accepted whatever his master taught. He also believed that human nature is evil. But the difference between what makes Sun Tzu a Confucian and not a legalist, and what makes Han Feiche a legalist, the difference is Sun Tzu believed that through education human nature can be transformed. If a person from childhood is trained and educated properly, that person can become a gentleman. That is what Sun Tzu believed in. That is what made him a Confucian. Han Feiche did not believe that. He believed that even if a person is given education, the human nature will always remain evil. And therefore, education is not the best policy. The best policy is rewards and punishment. The fear of punishment makes a person follow the law, not education, according to this school. Now, Li Si was a classmate of Han Feiche, and both of them went to the Qin state and served king. But Li Si was a bit jealous of Han Feiche because he was more of a scholar, and so he was worried that he would take away his position. And so he somehow conspired to discredit Han Feiche in the eyes of the Qin king, and he was arrested and poisoned in prison, and he died. And so Li Si emerged as the main advisor to the Qin king, and that Qin king was the first emperor Shi Huangdi. Okay, so the contribution of Li Si is that he contributed to the establishment of the first empire. Okay, so this is a legalist. So Shi Huangdi was a legalist. Okay, so just like say in India, you will say Chandragupta was held by Kautilya to establish the great Mauryan empire. So something similar. Okay, Li Si advised Shi Huangdi on how to go about conquering other states and establish his empire. Okay, so these are some of the contributions of the legalist. But legalism, because it was very harsh, you see most of these people associated with legalism died very violent deaths because they created a lot of enemies. Okay, because of their harsh policies. So Li Si was also killed brutally. Han Feiche, I told you, was poisoned. Shang Yang was also killed very brutally, and so on. And as far as the empire was concerned, that also did not last for a long time. once Shri Wangti died, his successors were not able to replicate his success. In fact, Li Se continued to advise the son of Shri Wangti, but he himself was not very successful. Eventually, people were fed up with legalism, and so the Qin dynasty was overthrown and replaced by the Han dynasty. Okay. Then the third school of thought is Taoism. So Taoism, as I told you, is more of a religious kind of a concept. It's more about self-improvement than anything else. Okay, and it's more individualistic in nature than social. Say, you can say Confucianism is more socially oriented because it emphasizes on social harmony and social relations. Taoism emphasizes more on internal improvement, how to attain peace, how to attain harmony in the sense of peace. Okay, so the people associated with Taoism are Lao Tzu, who is historically we don't know exactly if he existed. He is considered to be elder to Confucius. The other important person associated with Taoism is Chuang-Tzu. Okay, Chuang-Tzu. So these are two important people associated with Taoism. And important books one is Tao Te Ching. This is known as the first book of Taoism, and the second one is Chuang-Tzu, which is supposed to be written by Chuang-Tzu, so it's called Chuang-Tzu. So these are the two important books associated with Taoism. Now, as I told you, Tao means the way, the path. Okay, it's about harmony with heaven, and again this word comes Wu Wei. Okay, with regards to legalism, also I had told Wu Wei is the way. So in legalism, Wu Wei means when the king does not do anything. So it's a tactical type of an approach. In Taoism, Wu Wei means something else. It means to live a life in such a way that you live without any difficulty. You don't face any hardship in life. So go with the flow, go with nature. Okay, don't try to force anything. Whatever comes naturally, do it. Okay, live a natural life. Okay, that is actionless action. So it doesn't mean that you are not doing anything. You are doing something, but you are doing it in such a way that it is with the flow, with the nature. There is no friction between what you are doing and your surroundings. Okay. Now, another goal of the Taoists, because Taoists were experimenters, they used to experiment with different things. And one thing that Taoists were obsessed with was the elixir of immortality. Okay, they used to experiment because there were a lot of chemists who were Taoists, and they experimented with different chemicals, and the goal was to find that particular substance which would make you immortal. By taking that substance, you would not die. And a lot of Chinese emperors, because they were so powerful, ultimate thing that they feared was death. Okay, they knew that ultimately they will die, and so they were very, very anxious to become immortals. And so they encouraged these Taoist people to experiment on different herbs and concoctions in order to live a very long life. In fact, through these experiments, because of these experiments, a number of Chinese emperors died. In fact, it said even Shri Wangti died taking an elixir of immortality. Okay, because they used to take the risk in order to become immortal. Anyhow, so Taoism, as I told you, is still very popular. It's a popular religion in China. The next important school of thought is Moism. So it was founded by Mo Tzu, so that's why it's known as Moism. According to Mo Tzu, the root of evil is not lack of compassion. People are evil not because people are bad. He said the root cause of evil is partiality. People are partial. So people think that this is my friend, this is my son, this is my brother, and so they are biased to certain people and biased against other people. Okay, they have a partial kind of a thinking towards certain people. Okay, so that is the root of evil according to him. And if you remove partiality, then only evil can be eliminated. So he believed in universal brotherhood. He said that people should treat everyone equally. So just like you treat your father, you should treat every other person. Okay, so you respect your father. So Confucian will say, no, you must respect your father. Mozi will say, no, respect everyone like your father. Okay, so impartiality. They also believed in a frugal way of life. The Confucians, they believed in music, art, and so on. So he was completely against all that. He believed that this is wasteful expenditure. You should just live a simple life, have enough food to eat, and whatever is the basic requirement, beyond that you should not spend your money. Okay, so save your money. So frugal lifestyle. As far as governance is concerned, now remember, Confucians focused on virtue, the legalists focused on method, Mozi focused on specialization. So he says, if you are sick, you go to whom do you go? You go to the best doctor. Okay, whoever is expert in medicine, you will go to that person if you are sick. If you want a good set of clothes, you will go to a good tailor who can do that work properly. If you need say furniture, you go to a carpenter, the best person. Okay, then why is it that in government, just about anyone, just because someone is someone's son, becomes the king? So the government should also be run by experts. People who are expert in the art of governance, they should run the government. And so one of the goal of Mozi was to train his disciples to be expert in governance. And because he was a believer in universal brotherhood, he was a pacifist, he did not believe in war. And so he believed in order to secure the state, you should build walls and fortifications. To protect the city, you have to build fortification walls and defenses and so on and so forth. And so wall building was something which he encouraged. As a result, Mohists, they developed this technology of building walls. And so in China, walls are very common. If you look at this map again, here you can see this part, these are all walls. So even during the warring state period, different kingdoms build walls around them to protect them from foreign people. So here also you can see wall. So the Mohists were very expert in fortifications. So in this way, they proved to be very useful to different kings. So Mohists used to go, and Mozi and his disciples used to go to different kingdoms, advise the kings, and so during the warring state period, Mohism was quite popular. But once Shri Wangti came to power, basically Mohism was, you can say, completely eliminated. All the wall building thing was adopted by Shri Wangti, and he built the Great Wall of China. Okay, let's quickly go through other schools. School of Yin and Yang. So this is based on an ancient classic, I Ching. This is a kind of a mystical type of a school, as I told you before. So this is Tai Chi 2, as you can see this symbol here. Okay, the bright part is Yang, and Yin is the dark part. But within the dark part, you can see there is a small bright part, and within the bright part, there is a small dark part. What it is saying is, both these opposite things are intertwined. Reality is a mixture of opposites. Okay, it's a combination of opposites. So one side is the feminine, other side is the masculine. A balance between the two actually leads to the right path. That is the Tao. Tao is the balance between these two factors. So Chinese medicine, Chinese architecture, all these things are based on this concept of balance between the two. In fact, he identifies certain properties. Certain properties are associated with feminine, other qualities are associated with the masculine. For example, feminine is negative, passive, moon is feminine, earth is feminine, water is feminine, dark is feminine. If something is hidden, it is feminine. Cold is feminine. A tigress is feminine. So in Chinese culture, these things are considered to be feminine in nature. While masculine is positive, active, sun is considered masculine, heaven is masculine, fire is masculine, brightness is masculine, openness, opposite of hiddenness, is masculine, hot is masculine, and dragon is masculine. So tiger is feminine in Chinese culture, while a dragon is masculine. Okay, so now Yin and Yang school was gradually absorbed by the other schools. Okay, so other schools basically took over these ideas, and in fact, this is a very important part of Taoism and Confucianism today. Finally, the last school of names, okay, Mingxia. Now, these are logicians, as I told you, their works have not survived, but they used to apply logic to different things. In fact, some of the examples that I have are absurd. It's very absurd, and so I don't know whether I should mention it, but I would. Let's do that. So, one of the things that the logicians did was to prove certain statements to be true or false. For example, they used to prove that a white horse is not a horse. Now, how is that possible? So, they use linguistics to prove that. Okay, sometimes logic taken to the conclusion becomes very absurd. Okay, so what do? They say white horse is not equal to yellow. So, white horse is not a yellow horse. White horse is not a yellow horse. They are two different things. Now, but yellow horse is a horse. So, since yellow horse is a horse and white horse is not a yellow horse, that means white horse is not a horse. Did you get that? I think I'll write in a better space. So, let's see here. White horse is not equal to yellow horse. Okay. Yellow horse is equal to horse. Okay, it's a horse. So, since white horse is not yellow horse, that means therefore white horse is not a horse. Well, it's absurd, but anyhow, these are some of the things, paradoxes as they are called, that you find in literature. There's more to say, but we have very limited time, so I'll stop here. I have a list of certain other schools. Let me mention that before we end today's lecture. Finally, this is so I talked about the 6 schools according to Sima Than. Later on in a later book of Han, written by Pan Ku. Okay, Pan Ku wrote a book known as Book of Han, which is again a history book. It basically describes the period after what Sima Qian has written. This is the early period of the Han dynasty. He adds 4 more schools. Okay, 4 more schools of thought in China. First one, so these are the 4: School of Diplomacy, Agriculturalism, Syncretism, and School of Minor Talks. School of Minor Talks is something like what common people say in the streets, in the tea shop, in the market. So, it does not have very sophisticated thinking. It's a simple belief of the common people. Okay, that is known as School of Minor Talks. Syncretism tries to combine all the different schools together. So, it does not say that this school is right or that school is right. It says every school has something to offer. So, it picks and chooses from different schools and tries to construct a syncretic type of a philosophy, that is known as syncretism. The other 2 are more elaborate. Agriculturalism is a school of peasants. Basically, it emphasizes on agriculture as the best way of life. So, it believes in an egalitarian type of a communal type of a living, where no one owns private property, everyone works in the fields, and everyone is equal. So, for them the ideal is Shen Nung. Shen Nung, Nung comes from this name. Nung means peasant. Okay. So, Shen Nung is a mythical god king of China, an ancestor of the Yellow Emperor. So, he is supposed to have invented agriculture. Okay. So, the most prominent agriculturist philosopher was Su Xing. Su Xing, he advocated a communal, egalitarian, self-sufficient agrarian society, and they believe that the prices should be fixed. There should not be inflation or deflation. Everything should have a fixed price. Okay, so it's a kind of a, if you compare say with India, in India you will compare say with Gandhi. Okay, Gandhi's whose concept of village republic, self-sufficient villages and so on. It's something on similar lines. Finally, the last one is School of Diplomacy. Literally, it means school of vertical and horizontal. Zung Hang Chia, it means school of vertical and horizontal. Zung means vertical, Hang means horizontal. Now, this school is based on the book Strategies of the Warring States. Now, let's quickly explain what it means. So, vertical, this is vertical and this is horizontal. So based on the strategies of the 7 states, this idea is developed. Now what is vertical? Vertical means these states, Chao, Wei and Han and Chu should combine to defend themselves against Qin. They should form an alliance because Qin is becoming more powerful, so they should come together to protect themselves. That is the vertical. So that is the best strategy according to this school. Okay, otherwise Qin will be able to defeat them. And Qin follows the opposite policy. The policy of the Qin was the horizontal thing. So their policy was to align with a horizontal state, align with one of the states here, any one of them, to defeat the others with that alliance, and then gradually become more powerful and then attack them. Okay, this is something similar to Kautilia's mandala theory. First defeat a neighboring state with the help of neighbor's neighbor, and then once you have defeated the neighbor, then you attack neighbor's neighbor because you have become more powerful. So, okay, there's a lot to discuss, but we have run out of time today. So I stop here, and whatever remains we'll cover in the succeeding lectures. Thank you. China's rise is the most important political phenomenon of the 21st century. China has risen based on its economic growth. This graph shows us how China has grown. When the People's Republic of China was established, it was a very poor country, and the policies of Mao Zedong actually created a stagnation in Chinese economy. Although Mao was always talking about revolution and taking China forward, in reality Mao's revolutions impoverished China. It is only after 1978, when China started its economic reform, that China began to grow. It really took off after 1992, and this period from 1978 to 1992 was led by Deng Xiaoping, who is the father of the modern Chinese economy, a person who opened up China, created opportunities for China to rise. And then after 1992, you can see gradually China begins to grow. Okay, this is the $5 trillion economy mark. That is what India is aiming right now. India is here now. India has not yet reached 5 trillion. Then it continues to grow. So under Jiang Zemin, it crosses the $1.5 trillion mark, and then it grows even faster under Hu Jintao to become a $10 trillion economy and the second largest economy in the world. Then it continues to grow until it slows down in the COVID period under Xi Jinping. So China is growing, and in comparison to other countries, we can see what the status of China is. America, of course, is at the top with more than $25 trillion economy, the most powerful country in the world. China is rising. It has slowed down. So we are not sure if China is going to catch up with the United States. India is here below. India has to go a long way to catch up with China. Japan, this is Japan and this is Russia, are declining. They are not as strong as they were before. In fact, in the future their economy might decline further, both because of the demographic issue. The population, the total number of people in both Japan and Russia are declining, and China may soon face the same situation because of the one-child policy. Chinese population has peaked and it has begun to decline, as number of old people are going to remain or even grow because of aging population, and new children are not born. So the pyramid is going to reverse and China is going to become an old nation. It will have affect its economy. just like it affected the economy of Russia and Japan. Thank you.